Oh, look at you all coffee talked.
Hello. Yes, I've tried to rearrange things a little bit, correct some lighting and stuff, and change the microphone a little bit.
Very cool.
Hopefully,
I
it.
like the clockwork.
Yes, from Mr. Roger Wood.
Yeah, that's super cool. Maybe the audience wants to see that up close. It's pretty awesome.
This, I think,
Very cool.
this was given to me by Mr. Roger Wood because I'm a musician, and he knows that, I guess. And from one artist to another, and I think it was either a wedding present or a moving in present, something like that. I think it was a wedding present, to be honest.
Very cool.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I didn't do as much work as you for setup, but I thought we'd change the angle a little bit. That's what I see out in that direction, and that's a little more what today looks like.
Hmm.
See, my thought is if the CIA or the FBI is watching this, they can take the different photographs that I take from my windows and they can triangulate my position. So if I say anything that's too weird and communist, they can just have like the drone killer bees come through my window and then kill me in the middle of the night. It's like those bees that they're talking about. Those are not actually real bees at all. They're actually mechanical bees. They're about 2 inches long, and they say that they kill honeybees, but that's not what they do at all. They're here to kill humans.
What? Okay, so I've heard a couple of things online about something about the bees, the killer bees or something, but it's just like in passing. And I was like, okay, I don't understand the reference yet. And now I hear it from you. So like what is that?
Well, they are an invasive species. I believe it's from Japan. Um, Anyways, they don't particularly like honeybees. They feed on honeybees. There was a few colonies found in like Washington State and BC. Um, who knows how much of a problem it actually is? I think there's a tendency right now that anything that appears in the news that is bad just gets that rumble of like, how much
Mm.
worse can 2020 get? It's like anything that's horrible just like goes poof, viral and crazy. Um,
Mm.
and I think that's one of the really interesting things we're living through right now is everyone is online, everyone has a ton of time, everyone can speculate whatever crazy wild story they have, including of course my theory which I made up about the bees. But of course there's lots of science fiction out there that talks about uh, what would be the most effective way to control a population. Well, it wouldn't be by big military equipment. You would have like tiny things that would kill people. You could
Mm.
deploy a massive army, millions of these tiny things. Like, how are you going to defend yourself if, even just a dozen of these little tiny robots fly into your apartment? Ah! So you can always find a way to create a conspiracy theory given whatever information you have.
Mm.
It's
Well,
not that difficult.
yeah. I saw there was like an advertisement for like online security, something like that. But I don't know if it was online security because it was talking about the danger of having this might be a hindrance. I realized it's okay. The danger of having people implant hidden cameras inside your house on objects you buy and things like that, and it would show like I don't know, a woman wrapped in a towel who's being like secretly videotaped because it was on her electric toothbrush or something. I don't know,
Yeah.
or other videos where you're like being watched by hidden cameras. And that's one thing that I've thought about. Like, you know, that's a big reason why a lot of people, they put a piece of tape on their camera when they're not using it, and uh, and now it's like inescapable, or it may not be inescapable, but it's funny because we're in a gigantic we have a gigantic population with a lot of people who are very, very smart, and sometimes smart people aren't always the most morally straight as well, morally incorrupt, or whatever you want to call it. And so it's like it makes sense that there would be crazy things like this, like
Okay.
killer
I'm
electronic
interested
bees.
what you mean by smart people not necessarily being morally straight. Maybe I just need some clarification on what you mean by that.
Like people who are super geniuses, for example, but they were bullied as a kid, and now they have um, a thing against humanity, and now they want to take it out on humanity, or I don't know, situations where people do bad things. I mean, that's a good question to start off with too. Is like, why do people do bad things?
Hmm.
Um,
Oh, that is a very interesting question. My hope is that inside people actually don't think they're doing bad things. They are approaching whatever it is they're doing, no matter how horrific it is, from a sense of being right and doing good. I think that the example we use that everyone knows about is Hitler, and his theory and his all of that is, we got to remember, it's not just him. It's a lot of people that made up the Nazi Party and the Nazi thinking and that ideology that believed essentially that they were better. And I think that's the heart of it. And that's what I've often thought is the real beating heart of fascism, is not the others that you hate and want to destroy. The beating heart is inside that we are better than those others. Therefore, we can do what is necessary about what they called the Jewish question, because they were inferior. It's that sense of superiority that gives them a license to say this is the right thing to do.
hmm.
um, it's very seductive to think of oneself as better. My group is better than your group.
Hmm.
So to sort of bring it back to what we were talking about is people's motivations, and some I think are based on just strict survival. Like, my God, they're crushing us. Germany did have a lot of that. The conditions that were imposed upon them from the First World War were quite harsh, and they had to pay back a lot of debt, and they had to live under some pretty harsh times. And then it came along to the Great Depression, and so all of that economic stress builds up, and that's when fascist movements seem to arise, is when there's economic stress. So that is a very, very real concern right now,
Hmm.
that fascist movements are going to bubble to the surface, because there will be groups that feel oppressed, feel victimized.
Wow. Yeah, that's interesting. And that's it's interesting how, yeah, you mentioned the um, groups who feel oppressed will rise up and take action, and that can be dangerous. I just watched sorry, it was about a month ago now, but there was a Netflix series on World War II, and that was so cool to like learn more about the details. Like, I don't know, I either didn't pay attention or didn't learn anything about World War II history in high school, and I think it's probably the former. I didn't pay attention. The former? Yeah, I didn't pay attention.
There
That's
was
right.
very little at the high school level.
Hmm.
I took a minor in history, and in particular military history,
Oh, cool.
but that was at the university level. So
Hmm.
I remember, yeah, there was like almost nothing at the high school level. Just a very simple explanation of, it started in 1939. But when you go into military history level, you go like, well, actually in Japan, things started around 1933. There was all sorts of other conflicts. And the main sort of thing about World War II is you can really sort of connect it to World War One, that at 1918 the Great War ends, but all the stresses that get put into place in all the different world powers lead up to the conditions to make World War II. And like I said, of course, Japan was already in aggressive fighting stance by 1933. The Spanish were doing things in the early 30s as well. There was shit going on.
Hmm.
Shit was not perfect back then.
Yeah.
It was very not perfect.
Yeah, it described Germany having been, and like I feel ashamed for not even knowing this, but Germany in World War One kind of got their butts handed to them, so to speak. Like from what it sounded like, they had to retreat anyway. Maybe that's what it was. It wasn't that they were like completely obliterated, but they had to retract, and they felt kind of humiliated by the world from that particular war. And I think, if I remember correctly, it was episode one that they were talking about this. It was in the beginning. Japan kind of felt the same. Their people were kind of seen as being like, oh, they're not really a fighting force in the world. And then, um, yeah, yeah, interesting. So, can you tell me more about the economic depravity of Germany in World War II, like before that happened? Like, that's where I'm getting stuck. And
Well, yeah, you definitely connect to a sense of betrayal and loss of the First World War. Uh, Germany and the Austro-Hungarian Empire, thinking very highly of themselves at the time, to be defeated by a ragtag army of Slavics from, the Russian side of it. Even though the Russians, they were out long before 1918, they just could not sustain the fight. And that's what sparked the Russian Revolution, and then all this business of what we now know as communism. But that was kind of a side note. I can't remember what exact no, that was something else. Can't remember the Treaty of Versailles. That's the name. The Treaty of Versailles was the major powers, so America, Britain, and France, imposing a huge debt, reparations on Germany. You have to pay for all the damage of the war, and you're not allowed to have an army. You have a limit on all your army capacity. So that's very demoralizing. Links into what you were saying as well, that they don't deserve to be able to defend themselves, and that feeling builds up.
hmm,
And of course, Adolf, he was a soldier, so he's informed by fighting in the trenches. Now, something that's massive to consider about all of this is it's called the Great War for a reason, because it was on a scale just unbelievably larger than any war ever before then. We're talking about a slaughter on such a massive scale and insanity on such a massive scale. There's some battles that you can look at. There's a small mountain range in Italy. Italy was fighting Austria for this little tiny piece of nothing. It's really a worthless piece of territory, but they went on massive offensives. I think it was like 17 times. There were 17 battles for this tiny piece of nothing. And the scale of military firepower is mind boggling. when you weigh it, you actually literally weigh it, because our country, you see in the background there, you see our military. Um, Canada, essentially, its entire success is built on the Great War. You needed zinc, you need copper, you needed all those raw materials from the Canadian Shield. We dug up the Canadian Shield, built shells that literally are littered all over Europe. And the standard battle in World War One would start sometimes with several hours, like 9, 10, some battles like 20 hours of thousands of guns blasting constantly, a bombardment that literally, like large shells of metal that I can't even fit on this screen, being repeatedly shot, tens and tens, hundreds of thousands of giant pieces of steel flying through the air and smashing. Just such a major scale. But anyways, I've gone down a slight tangent with that. But the idea being, but maybe it's not a tangent, like the literal psychological bombardment of Germany as being a viable, you know, partner
Mm.
in the modern world, and it being enclosed in the center, with these elitist pigs on one side, the French and the British, and these ragtag gypsy, Jewy, kind of smelly Slavic-y people on the other side. And that was Hitler's actual goal, is the living space. He didn't care so much about invading Britain. He thought, whatever, they're nobody. What he
Yeah.
really wanted was space for the master race. And we'll bring it back to that seductive feeling of being better
Mm.
than all those Slavs. It's pretty much suicide to look at a map and say, yeah, we're gonna invade Russia. Oh my God. Do you know how big that place is?
Yeah.
You don't think that they might, do a slow retreat as you get closer to Moscow? You can do a lot of slow retreating into a lot of places where it's going to be not fun to fight.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so I wanted to ask you about maybe a situation today that relates to maybe the emotional or psychological sensation or experience or feeling that different groups of people or nations or whatever are experiencing right now, or potential. So, like, if uh, Hitler was a voice of what people were feeling at the time, and he harnessed the feeling of what everyone was bubbling up to feel and put them. I don't know if that's 100% accurate, but from what I understand, is there something like that that's happening right now? Like, of course, the Middle East has been in turmoil for a long time, but could you comment on that a little bit and open my experience or open my mind?
Definitely. I do think there is a very similar thing going on. It's in the United States. They have had that messaging for many, many decades.
The messaging that we are better, or the
Yeah.
okay.
I'm an American. I
Mm.
can do whatever I want. How dare you? I'm an American.
Mm.
That sort of just constant messaging that they deserve something better than the rest of the world. And the irony that it creates is those who are um, sort of wrapped up in this patriotism is actually fake patriotism. It often leads them to divide themselves in their own country rather than cooperating, working together, it's all directed towards, all these liberals and all these socialists and all these feminists and feminazis. Like the list just gets longer and longer and longer until essentially you start going, wait a second. If you dislike all of the people on this list, who's left? You basically have included 95% of the population, including yourself,
Mm.
will fit into one of those categories.
Mm-hmm.
Yet, the right wing machine, I'm going to say the propaganda machine, has done an excellent job at creating all of the same imagery that happened in the 1930s. Will it play out like Germany in 1930? Absolutely not. Of course not. It's
Mm-hmm.
an entirely different time. It's an entirely different place. One of the more likely outcomes is some massive civil unrest in the United States somewhere. I don't think it'll be shaped like a civil war. They love to throw out all this idea, oh, it's going to be a civil war. Those goddamn liberals are starting a civil war. Like, really? But they keep pushing out that word, civil war, civil war, civil war, until it becomes an actual thing that people think it might happen. The Civil War, and of course, unfortunately, in the United States, it's completely interlinked with their racist past, and which makes it that much more complex and potentially extremely dangerous. I don't know if you've seen the latest video online, but it's pretty fucking gruesome.
What's
Ahmad, I believe his name is Ahmad. He was jogging in Georgia, and three white guys, one of them a former police officer, were quite suspicious of him jogging in the neighborhood, and they followed him, and then one vehicle got ahead of him, and they cornered him, and they murdered him.
They murdered him.
Oh yeah.
And
they,
it's on. It's video. It's
it's
recorded.
the most gruesome video I've ever seen in my entire life. It's a 25-year-old guy, black guy, just jogging down the street. And of course, here's what makes it quite heinous, though. It happened 2 months ago, and only now is it coming out. And these guys haven't been charged with anything. They haven't really been questioned, other than the fact that they were, they questioned them a little bit and said, well, we were trying to make a citizen's arrest on this intruder, essentially. It's like, wow, that's pretty slim amount of evidence to be able just to, like, gun someone running down the street.
So what's the backstory on it?
Well, yeah, like, I don't know all of the details, and here's another thing. None of us really knows all of the details, but that essentially is probably what people want to know.
Yeah.
Like, what the fuck was that? And then it's very difficult to say a position like, I might go as far as, actually, you know what? Even if they did have a very strong reason to perform a citizen's arrest, like, say they caught him red-handed stealing something, I'm like, I don't want to really live in a society where guys with guns feel as though they can have the right to citizen arrest, even someone who's stolen something. Now, if someone's threatening the community in a violent way, then that's a whole different discussion. But I don't know if I want to live in a vigilante world where someone can easily make a mistake of, like, wow, that dude just came out of the back of your house and he's running. He stole from you, and then you confront him. And then, of course, fear and miscommunication occur, and then you end up killing an innocent person who was like, no, I was just borrowing his his thing from his garage. I called him on the phone. you
Hmm.
know, like that kind of stuff happens. So it's,
Hmm.
just frightening thing. So I don't know. Now that I've dropped the seed, you kind of end up having to watch the video, and you'll be a bit horrified. But
Yeah, I don't know. That's a scary thing. I don't know if I want to watch it. I suppose.
oh, I know. And then I watch it, and then I watch it again and again and again. It's like
So he was beaten and then died, or like they had weapons. Sorry, I don't
weapons.
know if we should go. Holy man! Even if
Three
they
three
were like
gunshots.
okay, so they brought guns. Their intention was to murder. I mean,
you know, I,
well, yeah,
they
yeah,
they say they were going to do a citizen's arrest, and I'm like, how? How? You're just going to stop the guy? You're not wearing any law enforcement sort of identification.
yeah.
So the guy's like, holy fuck, there's fucking guys with guns who are telling me to pull over.
Mm-hmm.
No wonder. And here's what happens in the video is he's jogging and he's like, holy fuck, I'm jogging off the road now. But then, this guy got a shotgun. So he's like, he tries to grab that shotgun out of his hand. And that's when the shots start happening. It's like, well, what the fuck are you going to do? Bunch of guys with guns? Are you going to try and fight for your life? I don't know. That's never happened to me. I don't know how I would react.
Yeah, yeah.
Seems like
Holy.
a rational reaction. Anyways,
I
I don't
mean,
know how we got to that one, but I guess that's our news segment of the show. By the way, you're watching West East Brotherhood. I am
indeed.
East. My name is Darcy.
And I'm West, and my name is Max. Though I am starting to slide into the professional name, which is actually my birth name, Marcus. But we'll see.
Ah,
We'll see how that goes.
we'll see how that goes. All right. Well, I remember from our last episode, we left with a subject that I would have loved to talk more about.
Okay.
And so there's new information about these guys.
Ah, okay. That'd be a lovely
Yeah,
conversation to have, actually. That'd be cool.
cool. Well, there's a recent video with these guys, and that screenshot.
Wait, hold on. Are they indeed actors?
No,
No. Okay.
no, and I'm so glad that there is a new video with them because I only saw it quickly once, and
Mm.
then it became a whole different story. And I was like, yeah, well, that point was kind of good. That point was kind of, yeah, reasonable. I don't know about that point. Jury's up on that one. Whatever. It was something I saw on the internet. But the next time I encountered the story of these guys, it was a whole like, oh, their YouTube video got taken down and blah, blah, blah. And it just became this huge, massive thing. And I was like, okay, well, I can't go back to the video now
Mm.
and hear what they're actually saying until someone embedded the video into something else, and then I was able to pick it apart and pick bits of information here or there. But anyways, what has now happened is now they are internet sensations. It didn't take me long to find out that essentially every YouTube slash podcast, whatever, they're in high demand. It makes sense. Their shit goes viral. Those are great guests to have on your show. And so there's one particular show where I watched the whole 25-minute interview with them. I watched it on faster speed, by the way, and anyone at home who wants to watch us on faster speed, that's always a good idea. As long as you can keep up with my genius thoughts, which are amazing. Anyways, I'll get back to these guys. In this latest video, it was great because rather than the way their press conference video was, which was kind of tense, there was
Uh-huh.
some tension in
Yep.
that press conference because I could feel he was kind of scared and like he's trying to make his point. And then I'm like, now I get it. That first video, um, it was his first attempt to communicate his concern, and he was a bit emotional about it, and it came off as something else. And people started to like latch onto that. Oh, here's an expert who will support the agenda that I have. Therefore, it just bursts out into viralness. But you'll see on this last interview with him, he says things that counter the narrative, like of opening up the economy.
Right.
He still sticks to what he says, though. He says, yeah, we have concerns that emergency patients are not coming in because they fear COVID. I'm like, yeah, that's a legitimate concern. He also says the shelter in place order was correct. And I think that's a huge one, because he said, yes, we did that. We flattened the curve, and now it's time to start talking about, addressing the needs of the other patients who have other problems. Like a guy that had chest pain that didn't come into the emergency department happened to be having a heart attack. Now that dude is, in a bad situation because he didn't come into the hospital quick enough. But he was also saying, yeah, we now have the capacity in the hospitals to deal with it. And it was on a much more calmer, rational talk, rather than two guys being put on the spot of like,
Right.
wait a second, you're going against the narrative of the government because I'm trying to say something. And he's like a bit amped up, you
Mm-hmm.
know?
Can
Now,
I?
why the video got taken down, he doesn't know either.
Mm.
And that's a big mystery. But anyways, I've said a lot. I wanted to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I just wanted a little bit of clarification. So you're talking about the second video. Is it the same video but just in its full length?
No, see this screenshot behind me.
Yeah.
That is from, there are multiple videos. This one is just from 3 days ago. It's a
Oh,
25-minute interview with a different like web show. Had
okay,
them
okay.
on as a guest, and they were able to explain, okay, so what was that original video all
Right.
about?
Because it's gone
And
now.
a brilliant thing was they started out with a full introduction of their names, where they went to school, where they practice medicine, so it doesn't get all encumbered by internet imagination. And so
Mm,
when you encounter this material like I did, I'm like, half of it is scrolling through tweets of people who are getting into their lizard brains or their conspiracy theory brains of like, they can't be right. Oh, they're completely right or they're completely wrong. There's nothing in between. And we're all into our camps. And I'm like, no, I think they made good points. And it's so disappointing because they did make good points. Um, but the discussion quickly became not about their good points. It quickly became about YouTube censorship. I'm sorry, that's a whole different topic.
yeah, yeah.
It became about right-wing conspiracy theorists, and it became about all these other subjects that had nothing to do with the medical points that they were trying to make. And so
Gotcha.
it says a lot about of striking a certain tone on the internet. The internet can grab it and mash it up and change it, and everyone uses it differently for their own agendas.
Mm-hmm.
That is a fascinating thing to watch. And I know you're a fan of Jordan Peterson. That I know is something that happened to Jordan Peterson's life.
Mm.
He will often say that he's not political, and I believe it when he says it. I believe he wants to be not political, but he's really very seldomly acknowledges that the audience has chosen to make you political, and now you no longer have a choice
Yeah.
because you are now Jordan Peterson internet famous, and therefore you might want to change the approach and the tone. And I think these doctors did. They changed their tone. I think they were a little more aware in those secondary interviews
Hmm.
that to make good points, and make sure that the discussion is focused on moving forward and not so much about judging what happened in the past. Sorry, the boat left the harbor. There's nothing we can do about that now. You
Hmm.
know, we can look back at that 5 years from now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I was curious about this in the last interview that we did because there's like it's like an hour long interview with these guys. And I actually watched it from start to finish, like
Okay.
the whole thing. And I was curious because a lot of the points that you brought up, I found, like you brought up just now, I was like, yeah, well, that was in the original video.
Yeah.
Um, and so I just wanted to mention that in case, and that's why I was asking you if if you were seeing like the entire video, or if it was just the result an entirely new interview. And now that I know there's an entirely new interview that I can go see. The other thing that I was thinking about, let's see if I can remember this. I'll practice my recall. Um, was just an interesting thing about how the internet can, and talking about Jordan Peterson too, how the internet can take information. Oh yeah, it's like you watch something like these doctors and use the information and cherry pick. This is often what a lot of people do, and a lot of people get criticized for it too. There's a lot of criticism for this behavior. But you cherry pick the information that suits your emotional drive, and then you say, "Ha, here's evidence for my emotional why I think this is right or wrong." And it's so hard to just, like you may have a certain part of your feelings that are correct in feeling the way that one might feel, but you also have to take a really hard look at yourself too to say, like, am I just using this? Am I just seeing these videos because it appeals to my desire to, like, get back at these people, or like get back at my sister or brother or whatever, that's like, or my
What
cousin
did I
or
do?
yeah. And it's so hard. I think for me, I'm not a feminist, but this is often, but I had a hard time with. I'm not a feminist. I don't identify as a feminist, but I did have a hard time with that ideology for a long time because of the behavior that, and there's all kinds of different colors of feminism too, but of the different behavior that I think feminists often portray as being bad for men. And I don't like the whole class guilt thing, that white men should be just automatically guilty or feel guilty, or feel like they have to apologize for something every time they talk about something. But um, the reason I felt that pull against feminism was because I would have people that it felt as if they were like shouting at me. It felt
Yeah.
as if everyone was attacking me. And it's like if I opened the door for someone and I get rid of, this actually never happened to me, but as an example, if a man opens the door for a woman and they get ridiculed for it because, and I think this topic's kind of overdone and people are kind of ignoring it now, but regardless, you get ridiculed for opening the door for a woman because they're independent and that sort of thing. And yeah, yeah. And so I could see myself being pulled towards certain types of videos that was aimed against feminism so that I could articulate what was going on inside and what I could feel. Um, but then I had to really check myself, and I think that's really important for people to check. And I think that's really cool that maybe we're doing this so that we can kind of view the different angles of what these two doctors were saying. And I'm really interested to see the new video that they put out.
Well, there's going to be lots of them. Um,
Hmm.
they're in demand guests for essentially every online show there is. They'll probably even make it to the mainstream media at some point.
Well, that's the irony, I guess, now too, is that it's like in the beginning they decided to maybe be bold and do something at the risk of losing their reputation, all that kind of thing, and now they're going to be shot off into rocket space of fame potentially.
Well, here's an interesting thing to think about. There are people who know how to encourage shooting off into space. And so this is my conspiracy theory. I'll just be upfront about it. But certain videos, when they get taken down from YouTube or someone gets banned from Twitter or Facebook or whatever, have we considered that there are groups of organized people who work online to affect that exact outcome? Because if you can get someone banned on Twitter, you can have a bunch of shadow accounts that are all going to make a complaint to Twitter about a certain tweet, and they're just going to do it over and over and over again until they get that person banned from Twitter. The banning that person on Twitter then becomes the new narrative, and then that person shoots up to fame or
Mm.
internet fame. Now, do I think that's actually happening? I'm going to say yes, but I'm going to say it with a big caveat, a huge
Mm.
caveat.
Hmm.
Something that I think a lot of people forget about is there's an underground movement that's been there for a long time, and they were never allowed to speak in public forums for a long time, and for good reason, because what they really wanted to talk about was going back to murdering Jews. That's essentially what they wanted to do. They are underground racists, and they always were. And then in the 1980s, who were the people that experimented with the internet the most? It was those guys. I looked up this guy, Gary Lauk. He got banned from Europe. Essentially, every European country was like, "Oh my God, you got to stop spreading all this Nazi propaganda. We just don't do that here anymore." So he said, "Fuck it, I'm out of Europe," and he moved to Kentucky. And in Kentucky, that's where he was. Was it Kentucky or Arkansas? It doesn't matter. Anyways, but that's where he started building a internet network of websites that we never saw in the 1990s when he was starting. Like, we're talking about internet slow, awful, bleh.
Hmm.
But he had the first step in how to build internet propaganda that goes crazy. And so there's like, man, we missed that because we were all just sort of innocently living our lives, whatever. And then it was some of the darkest thinkers had already thought how they can make shit go crazy online. It was a huge gift given to some of the darkest people on the planet. It was a communication tool. That was the thing that they were missing,
Hmm.
because you couldn't go parade down the street wearing swastikas and try and recruit people into your movement. But what you could do online was have all this subtle stuff that slowly bends people towards a different opinion of other people. And so I think about the rabbit hole. A lot of people that build content on the internet are completely innocent people, but some of the people out there that have their own agenda were like, that video, they're attacking SJWs. They're attacking the feminazis. Ooh, let's send them a few subscriptions. Let's boost that content. Let's send it around the world a bit. Let's get them amped up. Ooh, my channel's doing really well. And then you see, there was this one guy in the States. he was making very socialist, you call them socialist videos in like 2015. And as uh, Bernie Sanders' campaign was like, oh, he's about to lose, his content started to change to more pro-Trump. And I'm like, oh, that's kind of an interesting shift. But I also saw his subscribers and his popularity was going up, which I don't doubt. He was gaining some popularity from real people, but I'm like, I wonder if they have ways of manipulating that. And the answer is, of course,
Mm.
yes. I don't want to make it specific about just Donald Trump and the Republican Party. It's also the Democratic Party. They spend money on the internet for like troll farms and stuff to push certain content and bring certain content down. So I do want to relate this back to what you were sort of inquiring about, rather than just Darcy ranting along for a while, is this idea of thinking about the rabbit hole. And the internet is learning about you all the time. So it's constantly sending you more and more stuff that it thinks you might like. It doesn't, it happens to me all the time. I'll watch one video and then all of a sudden the recommended videos start changing.
Mm-hmm.
So you got to think about this rabbit hole, and are they grabbing a certain emotional part of you and running with something that's not entirely true? SJWs, that was a hot topic for a while. If you wanted to ramp up your YouTube channel and just make, fucking stupid SJWs videos, like some of them were pretty horrific, it was just fucking music with cars smashing into people. But you can get a hell of a lot of views on that, you can get a hell of a lot of views. So on the internet, you will be rewarded for stuff that is pretty raunchy. And so it is always something to ask yourself about any content that you're watching. Does it have those subtle signs of pulling on whatever emotional string that you have? Or in a more simple way, it's trying to confirm what you suspect or hope to be true. If I have something in myself that I think of as being less worthy or whatever, if someone confirms my bias to that, I'm like, oh, I'm a fan of them, because I feel oppressed. I feel oppressed by the world. But then this stranger on the internet is, yeah, don't feel oppressed about that. No, you're right all along. It's those people's fault, not your fault. And so come to me, I'll make you feel good. Make you feel good, because it's all their fault. You had nothing to do with it. So rather than looking inward, we're looking outward to blame others. And that is really the core of it all. Is that if we're always looking outward, we're in for some troubled times, especially now that we have this huge economic situation that's going to make people feel make them feel oppressed in one way or another.
That's a good one. That's kind of scary.
Economics is the most real thing in our society. Now, that's, me speaking from a biased perspective, but I do think it's real, because when you're poor, you fucking know it. You do. You really do. And when you're rich, it seems, as I've never been rich, so I can only guess, it seems like you know it less. The richer you get, the less aware you are of the role of economics and wealth in our society. As you go down the ladder, it's literally, you feel it in your stomach, where the more you have, the less you're sort of aware of it. And it's played out by thousands and thousands and thousands of studies showing things like people rating themselves as in the middle class, and people that have like a $250,000 a year salary rating themselves as a middle class person. And it's like, wow, are you aware that that's like the top 2% of North American society?
Wow, yeah. Compared to
It's
the
like,
world.
you're the middle? Anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, there's something that I was going to say, and I'm trying to think of it now. Oh, that was going to kind of be my lead up question actually today, but maybe it'll be for next time. Because the previous video we did was on motivation, and it was on whether, like capitalism, and whether the primary motivation for that is money, and allowing people to be free in how they acquire that money, I suppose, in a basic sense. And maybe that's wrong, I suppose. But my question was going to be, and maybe we'll do it for next time, is there a different motivation that we could set in place that would reward people, that would set them on the right path? For example, we were talking about the one section of video that I loved, the CEO that votes no, we need to keep the business in our country, but then has to turn around and vote yes because they're on the board to let's move our what is it, shipping supplies in from other countries.
Yep.
What's another aim? Yeah.
Yeah. Essentially, it's the different metrics that we use to gauge success. In the 70s, like it's a law that you're a corporation, that your number one objective. Nope. That's just to warn us.
That's our 3 minutes.
That's true. Yeah, that's to warn us that we're close to an hour. I didn't know if we're gonna try and stop in an hour, but maybe we'll try. I'll try and do a
Yeah.
quick answer.
Let this be our tag.
Our tag. All right. The metrics of success. And corporations, by law, are required to deliver profit to the shareholders. And that metric has become the only metric that they gauge their success on. Whereas a community would decide, well, this is such a vital enterprise to, say, a city, that perhaps that city, the health and safety in that community should be also one of the metrics of success. The health and safety of the workers in that enterprise should also be a metric of success. The word a stakeholder rather than a shareholder. A shareholder is just someone who owns, a piece of the company, and they're expecting a dividend or a return or a capital gain. It's all based on money. Whereas, isn't the city where you set this corporation up, aren't they a stakeholder in this success? Didn't they allow you to begin this corporation there using your roads, using your stop signs, using your water system that the people of this town provided you? It said, yes, come here, build your widgets here, and we will give you all these things like water, and we'll make sure that you have workers and that they're fed and that they are in healthy, safe communities, families building up. So all of those considerations, they don't exist anymore. This is why we kind of say some people will say, well, we're at end stage capitalism, where all of those stakeholder or community considerations are just no longer considerations. And maybe they should be in some way. And like you say, how do we incentivize a more human-based capitalism?
All right. This is Marcus from the West.
Oh, Darcy from the East.
And
Funny.
this is the West East Brotherhood.
Cool. That's that's the East Coast in the background.
And